The following program is being funded by the Harmony Hill Performing Arts Foundation, protecting creativity throughout the Northeast and the world. Ladies and gentlemen, and children of all ages, welcome to the Overall View, the program that lets you see from God's perspective the entire world and how God sees it all. Your hostess for this travel adventure is Josephine Russo, presenting for you the big picture. Because once you see the larger picture, everything else will seem smaller by comparison. May your troubles be few and your vision be large. And now, here's Josephine Russo.
So much. I want to thank Peabody Access Telecommunications for this beautiful studio. I'd like my guest to introduce herself, and I thank her so much for last minute being with us on an overall view.
Hi, my name is Della Rita Rossetti, and
Wonderful.
I decided to come forward and to try to help people if I can.
Wonderful.
I guess we'd have to start at the beginning. I've written a complete autobiography that one day I hope to get it published, called A Rose Among Thorns, because many people have called me a rose among thorns.
Can you, from your own background, from your own story, from your own pain, can you relate to what happened in Connecticut? Can you give anybody any advice with children that are into these violent video games? Can you relate to the world that something has to be done to help the mentally ill, to stop this copycat shooting? And can you help us with that?
Well, I can say that I did go on in my life to some pretty great things. My degree is in criminal justice, human services. I took every psychology course that you could imagine under the sun in the next 4 years. And I got straight A's in almost every single course I took, because I wanted to learn about the human mind. I wanted to know why so many violent things happen and why they happen to me. And I wanted to know also the type of people that commit these type of crimes and why they do it. I wanted to know everything I could about violence. I studied violent crime and serial killers for 20 years, and I learned a great deal about these type of people. And in every case, it goes back to the family. And it goes back to mental illness sometimes in their families. And it goes back to abuse and neglect in their families. A lot of the kids that I worked with were severely disturbed adolescent boys and girls. I've worked in psychiatric hospitals. I've worked in drug treatment facilities, and again, the pattern is over and over and over. It starts in the home. And I'm not saying that all parents are to blame. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that mental illness is so overlooked. It is so overlooked.
I agree.
And I'm saying that these SSRIs and all of these antidepressants are creating a catastrophe in this country. My own daughter has been on over 45 to 50 medications. She is a case study with the citizens for human rights in Boston, and they said I could say that, so I will say that. The damage that they did to her over the years in just using her as a guinea pig to experiment with psychotropic drugs or all these different drugs because she started with epilepsy and depression is overwhelming and has affected every facet of her life. She was put on the drug Klonopin at the age of 12 years old, a highly addictive drug.
Wow.
That caused her to suffer later on a very serious addiction in her life. She is 26 years old now. She's been chronically ill since almost the day she was born. She has spent several times in psychiatric hospitals where they have overloaded her with more medications and side effects. And I must say, this day, I am the proudest I've ever been of her. She has taken herself almost all medications except for her chronic illnesses. And when she took herself off that Klonopin, she became a totally different person again. She is drug-free as far as I'm concerned. And that says a lot about our society, because there was a time I didn't even know my daughter. I didn't know her. She was violent. Her behavior was erratic. She was suicidal for many years and very violent at times. And now I know that that was due to all of these different dangerous drugs that are out there. And there are millions and millions of children that are on these drugs today. This has to stop. Of the 14 shootings, and I just read this, of the 14 school shootings, every one of these shooters, either they're on SSRI or certain medications, or they have been taken off of them. What does that say about our society?
Right. And what about the violent video games?
I think that violence in general, it's funny, when I was in college and I was like an exemplary student, they asked me what was bothering me, and I said, all these violent movies. They're not just violent anymore, they're graphically vivid. You take people that have mental problems who are watching this violence over and over again, and that definitely goes into violent video games. And you're creating something very serious in the way of violence in our future. These are young kids, and these are young people that are committing these acts in the schools as well. I bet you a lot of them have been addicted to violent video games. My daughter is involved right now in a divorce child custody suit where my ex-son-in-law is unbelievably addicted to violent video games, namely War of Warcraft, which I think is one of the most damaging games out there. There are couples that have broken up over this game. There are students that have not been able to complete their studies because of these games. And there are people that have committed murder and said they watch the video games incessantly. So, yes,
so they're brainwashed.
They're brainwashed.
Into it.
They're brainwashed.
And until we get rid of these addictions to these games, it's sad to say that gun control is not the whole answer. It's very sad to say that it isn't the gun, it's the person behind the gun.
Exactly.
And it's the irresponsibility of people owning guns that they're not locked up.
Right.
That they're not, that they have children.
Right.
That have access to these guns. So there should be a control on what we see, because if we're brainwashed and addicted to these things,
right,
then we're not going to solve the shootings. This is horrific.
It's horrible. I was with my daughter's father for almost 7 years, and this is hard to talk about, but I feel it might be able to help some people out there understand actually what goes on. I love this man more than life itself, but I knew early on that he had emotional problems. I thought I would be able to help him with those problems, so I remained with him. At the time, I had my daughter and my son. And I'm sad to say that I stayed with him all that time because he was obsessed with guns. He wasn't obsessed with violent video games. He was obsessed with guns. Why? Because he developed epilepsy as a teenager. Let's go back into why he became obsessed with guns. Because he developed epilepsy at a young age as a teenager, where he felt, okay, now I can't go into the military. Now I'm going to have trouble finding jobs. And he began to feel so incomplete as a man and as a person. So I think that his obsession with guns kind of predominated our life together. Ironically, it's very difficult for me to say this, we separated, and at that time I knew there was going to be a tragedy, and I went to the court and I told the judge, take his guns away, Your Honor. I swear to you I did that. I said, take his guns away. And he stated in court he didn't have any. All he had were replicas. And I said, Your Honor, in almost 7 years of being with him, he's made an assault rifle. He's got black powder in the house. He's had handguns around the house where I've almost been shot. And I had almost been shot another time when he was unstable. He was holding a rifle on me, and we were able to defuse that situation. I knew at that moment when I was in that courtroom that if the judge didn't act on that, that something terrible would happen. Very shortly after that, my daughter's father picked up a handgun and shot himself in the head and died.
Wow.
And I had to tell my daughter that night that her daddy was never coming home. And I'm still very angry that something wasn't done about that now. That's after the fact. Just like the Connecticut shooting is after the fact now. It's about time we concentrate on before the fact. Mental illness plays a great part in all this. No one should be issued a gun who hasn't had a background check, whether they have any kind of mental illness or even instability in their family.
Right. Right.
And the assault rifles should be off the streets in our cities and towns. There's no reason that citizens need to carry assault rifles. 100 rounds of ammunition can destroy 100 lives in a few seconds. So something has to be done now. Let the lives of those 20 innocent little angels, let their lives mean something now. There has to be an end to gun violence. And it's also got to include the problems of mental illness that we're not dealing with.
Nobody wants to deal with it.
No. Instead, we cut the funding for over $1 billion for all our mental health programs and all our mental health facilities that were helping so many people. So it actually puts us more
At risk.
at risk,
Amen.
all of us.
Yes, all of us. So as we conclude an overall view, it has been great having you as my guest.
Thank you.
It is a very heavy, heart-wrenching topic, but it needs to be addressed. It needs to be spoken about because the President of the United States, President Barack Obama, his wife, his children. He's a father, he's a parent. Every parent that witnesses this horrific act, the adults that died trying to save and spare the children, the school children that hear this on the news are terrified. And unless we as adults become responsible for our actions, unless we have advocacy for those we love that are mentally ill, unless we deal with addiction of violence in video games, addiction with alcohol, addiction with drugs, addiction with sex, unless we come back to God and God's holy word and the 10 Commandments, unless we repent and turn our lives and our will over to God, we are going to witness even more horrific things. So I thank you, and I ask God to anoint you and bless you, and for you to come forward with your story. It is a very painful, heart-wrenching story of what you've been through. But God has stood by you and helped you to help others. And that's what we're called to do. We're not called to be selfish in our churches. You know, I have to say, even in the Christian world, even in the born-again Christian world, do you realize that pastors, priests, clergy don't want to deal with this? They don't want mentally ill people.
No, they don't.
They don't want them in their congregation.
No.
They want normal people. They want people that give money. They want people that are going to work for them.
That's right.
They don't want to deal with it, period. And I know that for a fact. I have helped people since I have been 28 years old. I'm not trying to blow my own horn. I'm nobody at all. I am saved by His amazing grace and His most precious blood and His mercy. But God gave me a heart and a gift to reach out to the alcoholic, to the drug addict, to the mentally ill, to the handicapped, because we're all valuable. He shed His blood for all of us. And for these priests that profess Christ just to ignore people that are sick, just to walk by, and sometimes they actually ask you to leave. If they think you're a little bit off, they don't want you in their congregation. They want the wealthy, they want the people that are given, they want the people that are talented. They don't want to work.
I want to
For the poor, for the broken. And
true.
we're all broken. I don't care how much money you have. If you're born, you're broken. Because we're born into sin. We're born, I don't care what status you have, what claim to fame you have. We're all broken. And unless we learn to reach out to each other and to be kind and less offensive and less judgmental of religion, of sexual orientation, of color of a person's skin, we are at risk. We got to learn to love like Christ loved.
I think I agree with everything that you're saying. In the 1980s, I found that I've always had an open door policy for kids because I ran away from home from that abuse. And I literally lived on the streets of San Francisco. And what I experienced in the next 3 months is why I wrote my book. It is so horrific that I survived it all. It is so horrific that most people would find it totally unimaginable that I survived it. So in the 1980s, I remember there was a bunch of young teenage kids that were hanging around my house, and my son was a young teenage boy. And I thought to myself, how many of my friends have died from drugs or alcohol-related deaths or drug alcohol-related deaths? And I found it within myself to expose myself. And I said, I'm going to start a drug program. And I got these kids together. There were 7 that started it, and we named it SODA, Stamp Out Drug Abuse. And I started with a handful of kids and ended up with a couple hundred.
Wow.
It almost ended up a national program. And for people to say in these little towns and cities around here, there are no drug problems, you're badly mistaken. And it's probably your child that is doing something you don't know about. Because the youngest child that came and knocked on the back of my door, I asked him how old you are, how old he was, and he said, I'm 10 years old.
Wow.
And I said, and what do you do? And he goes, I drink. He goes, I hear you're the woman that you can come to her house and talk to her. And I started a program that is very similar to Scared Straight. It's a prison program from Rahway, New Jersey. And I started my program very similar. I was going to scare the hell out of them straight. But I did it in a very different way. I wasn't taking them to a prison and showing them lifers and scaring the life out of them. I was sitting them down and showing them photographs. And I mean several photograph albums that I have filled with friends of mine that have died.
Yeah.
That never made it past high school.
Yeah.
And a lot of them never made it into their 20s. These were beautiful and wonderful and vibrant and intelligent friends of mine that are all gone. And I remember one Christmas, my girlfriend Lisa's mother, her son had died, rest in peace. He had died from a heroin overdose. And I remember her mother said to me on the phone, it's not snowing in San Francisco, it's not snowing here, but you've made it a white Christmas because you survived it, where a lot of your friends didn't. So then I was so proud that I had started SODA. And to go back to what you were saying, do you know I got a call from everybody. I mean, they brought the newsmen in, and they did a big story in one newspaper, and they did a big story in another newspaper, and they had pictures of me and my kids there. But when I went to a church and I said, wow, I've got a couple hundred kids here and this is growing and I need some help. And I said, can I please have just a spare room? I mean, my house is like completely taken over with kids. They're here like from the morning until 11 o'clock at night. I said, we just need a little more space. And I remember the priest saying to me, well, that's really a liability. And would you believe that everybody that I spoke to about needing help from this person or that person, this organization or that organization, everybody was telling me, that's a liability. I'm sorry, I can't help you. And here I was doing this unselfishly from the bottom of my heart. I had no time for myself then. I was so involved with these kids and had advocated for a lot of them because they had a lot more problems than just drugs. They had a lot of problems at home, so I worked with other agencies. And to think that no one would help me to help these kids says a lot about the problems that are going on even today. I mean, where's the help for these mentally ill people to go to? Where can kids go to after school? Where are their mentors? Mothers and fathers usually have to work. A lot of mothers are raising children in single-family homes now, or fathers are raising children in single-family homes. Something's going to get missed here, and I'm not saying it's the parents' fault. I'm saying I was raised in a severely broken home, one of the worst broken homes that you can imagine. I went through 17 years of cutting. I went through 13 years of abuse therapy just to learn what the word was. I didn't even know what abuse was. And when I was married to my second husband, I did everything I could to get him to hit me just so I'd feel normal.
Wow.
So it took a long time to realize that I will never accept abuse in any way, shape, or form or manner, and that none of us should. And I'm too afraid after what's happened in Connecticut that there's going to be a repeat of this unless something changes dramatically. And that means with senators and governors, because what you're not realizing is that it could be your son or your daughter next. None of us are immune from this violence,
No.
especially gun violence.
So as we draw an overall view to a close, I want to thank you once again. And when is your book coming out?
Well, I just wrote my first children's book, and it's called Chester Rogel's Big Adventure. Okay, I can let that out. I've been contacted by a publishing company, and I think we're going to take it from there. But Chester is an angelic rabbit, and I've created all of these animals in the light of the way people should be treating one another. This, to me, is a spiritual book, a children's book, and I'm going to write a series of them.
Now, if someone wanted to get a hold of you, how would they do it?
You can get a hold of me either through Facebook. I'm on Facebook. My email is drita.rose7@gmail.com, and anybody's welcome to comment on anything that I've said today.
Wonderful. So I want to thank you once again. It has been a very heavy topic, but very necessary. Very, very necessary, I think, that we address these issues. And there are wonderful people like you that tried so hard to help the children. They came to your door. And I just beg churches, Christian and non-Christian alike, please have more sensitivity, more kindness, more compassion on allowing these programs that are so necessary. They can't be ignored. They can't be just forgotten about. Please help. Please help the broken so that there will not be a repeat of this horrific violence. Watch what your children are viewing on the computer, on the television. Right. We're living in such technology, but what is it leading us to? Is it leading us closer to God or away from God? That's the question. God so loved the world, and God is love. Why He allowed this to happen is because there's no answer to that, but my answer would be He gave us a free will. We're not robots. We don't have to follow Him. We don't have to obey God's laws. He gave us a free will. And what we do with that free will is so important. It's so vital that we do what's right. So God bless you. Thank you once again.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Alfred Nesser, film producer of the show. Thank you, Peabody Access Telecommunications.
The preceding program was funded by the Harmony Hill Performing Arts Foundation, serving and protecting creativity throughout the Northeast and the world.